Hi, and welcome back to Psychology with me, Mr. Snyder, and today we're going to finish our discussion of memory by talking about the process of retrieval and why that process sometimes fails. Your learning objectives today are to talk about the importance of retrieval cues, explain how our memories change, why we forget, and how we can improve memory retrieval, talk about interference and decay, and different types of memory and memory disorders. So your retrieval cues are stimuli for remembering something, and retrieval of information becomes easier when you have more cues stored with a piece of information. And this all depends on how much specificity that you have. Encoding specificity is the tendency for memory to be improved if related information, such as the surroundings or your physiological or emotional state, is available when memory is first formed, is also available when the memory is being retrieved. And so retrieval conditions or cues can be internal or external. So according to encoding specificity, I have trouble with that word. Context-dependent learning is the physical surroundings are the same. So according to this theory, if you were to take a chemistry test, you would benefit by taking it in the same room as you learned the information from. State-dependent learning refers to the particular physiological state or psychological state during which the memories were formed. So if you're sad, happy, stuff like that, that will help you remember things that happened when you were in those physiological states before. In order to improve memory retrieval, you can try such things as mnemonics and mnemonic devices, which are strategies and memory tricks to help us remember information. And those are things I'm sure you've heard of, such as acronyms. Every good boy does fine are the notes on the lines of the staff in music, and FACE, F-A-C-E, are the notes in the middle. Acrostics, linking things together, and rhythmic devices all help with memory retrieval. And here are the definition: easy to remember words that abbreviate a longer term, sentences used to remember something, linking, making a list to remember items that are linked together, also called the story method, and then rhythmic devices, a rhyming song or pattern. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, just as an example. Kinds of memory retrieval: we've got recall and recognition. And these are two different kinds of memory retrieval. One is easier than the other. The recall is just the type of memory retrieval that must be pulled from memory with very few external clues. And recognition is just the ability to match a piece of information to a stored image or fact. And so in recall, you may have, there's a couple of different theories in recall. One is the tip of the tongue phenomenon, which is where you think that the answer is so close and you can almost pull it and it feels like it's on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't get it. And then the serial position effect is the tendency for information at the beginning of what you memorize and the end of what you memorize in a body of information to be remembered more accurately than stuff in the middle. So if I were to give you a list of 15 numbers, you would more than likely recognize and be able to recall the numbers at the beginning and the end of the list. And the primacy effect are the numbers at the beginning, and the recency effect are the numbers at the end. Just different names for numbers at the beginning or the end. Here you can go the primacy effect versus the recency effect. Information at the beginning of the list is recalled at a higher rate versus information at the end of the list. The beginning information they think may receive more rehearsal and therefore enter long-term memory faster. Information at the end of the list is remembered because it's still in short-term memory when you are trying to recall it. Recognition is much easier than recall, and this is different multiple choice questions, matching questions, true-false tests. The cue is the actual word or object or sounds that you're trying to detect as familiar and known. It's accurate, especially for human faces, but it's prone to false positives, which means you think you have the right answer, but then you really don't. And speaking of eyewitness testimony and false positives, Elizabeth Loftus is one of the most influential psychologists in the last 50 years. She's shown that people's memories can be altered and they're not accurate. And eyewitness testimony puts people away in jail for life in some instances. So is that right if eyewitness memory is prone to produce false positives? She has showed that what people see and hear about an event after the fact can affect the accuracy of their memories of that event. So our memories are not just like a videotape being played. They are altered and continuously changing. And she focuses on eyewitness testimony. She's been a researcher or a witness at over 200 trials for eyewitness testimony. Pardon me. Now let's move on to how memories can change, automatic encoding. Some kinds of these long-term memories that we have enter permanent storage with little or no effort at all. And one of those is called Flashbulb Memories. It's it's an unexpected event that causes strong emotional associations for the person remembering it. A lot of people have flashbulb memories today about 9/11. I'm sure your parents may have flashbulb memories about when Kennedy was shot, and your grandparents when Pearl Harbor happened. These memories, although not necessarily more accurate because they're subject to decay and alterations over time as well, it's the strong emotional associations with it that make it seem like it is correct. The constructive processing of memories. This is kind of what I was talking about before. Our memories are constructed. These memories are altered, revised, or influenced by newer information. Hindsight bias is an example of this. It's when you falsely believe that you correctly predicted the outcome of an event. And I saw a funny meme that reminds me of this. It's Taylor Swift singing, "I knew you were trouble when you walked in." Nope, that's the hindsight bias. She didn't know that guy was trouble when he walked in. So hindsight bias, you think you correctly predicted the outcome, but that's only because your memory has been altered by newer information. Memory retrieval problems as well. The misinformation effect is the tendency of this misleading information after an event to alter the memories itself of the event. And very few people have true total recall who can remember everything about an event. They just think that their memories are more accurate than they really are. How fast do we forget? Well, it turns out very quickly. Hermann Ebbinghaus is one of the first researchers to study forgetting in the early 1900s. And when we graph his results, we get the curve of forgetting. And forgetting happens at the greatest time just after you learned the information. The distributed practice produces far better results of information than does massed practice. And what do those mean? Mass practice is basically cramming all at once. And distributed practice means learning a little bit at a time. Here is the curve of forgetting. You can see, and he used nonsense syllables so that we couldn't connect the information to anything else that we already knew. Basically, these times in hours, immediate recall is almost 100%. Wait 20 minutes after learning, and that number drops all the way down to lower than 60%. After an hour, you're approaching 40%. 9 hours, you're below 40%. And then it levels off from there into the 20s about being able to recall. You're recalling only about 20% of what you can originally remember. Why do we forget? Well, there's 3 theories. There's encoding failure, decay, and interference. Encoding failure is failure to process the information into memory, and one of the reasons of massed practice not working is encoding failure. You just can't process all of that information at once. That's why it's better to distribute it over time. A memory trace is a physical change in the brain that occurs when the memory is formed. So like in your neurons, the neural pathway is activated when this memory is formed, and if we don't use that memory enough, then that neural pathway is basically shut down. And so they use in the book the example of people walking across the path of grass and stomping it down, and if nobody walks across that path of grass again, it'll grow back and you won't be able to access that information anymore. And then decay is just loss of memory due to the passage of time, and the memory trace is not used. So that neural pathway decays, and that information decays. Here's an example of failure to process information. Which of these stop signs is correct? You see a stop sign probably every day, yet most people could not tell which one of these is correct. By the way, it's the one on the middle right. And interference. In the case of long-term memory, interference can come from two different directions. And I'm not going to ask you on the test which one is which. I just want you to know that interference is when information pushes stuff out of your short-term and long-term memory. So, but there is proactive and retroactive interference. I just want you to know what interference is, period. Here's proactive versus retroactive interference. I just want you to know that interference is when it pushes stuff out of your memory, period. Memory disorders. When memory fails, it can lead to some sort of organic amnesia, which means that it was not caused by a biological event, or I'm sorry, a external event. Causes of memory failure includes concussions, brain injuries brought about by trauma, alcoholism, and disorders of the aging brain. And there's two different types of amnesia that go both directions. Retrograde amnesia is when you cannot remember anything before, retro meaning backward, and the consolidation process gets disrupted and we lose nearly everything that was not already finished. And this is associated with accidents. This is what we call soap opera amnesia, because the person always gets hit and they can't remember who they are or anyone in their life. And pterygrade amnesia is the inability to form new memories. And this can be caused by concussions, and this is what is associated with senile dementia. Senile dementia means the severe forgetfulness just due to getting old. And that's all I have for you today about retrieval failure and retrieval and why we forget. We will have a quiz after these two sections, so be sure to study this information well. Fill out your learning targets, and I'll answer any questions you have back in class. Bye-bye.